Welcome back to America's Commercial Real Estate Show. I'm Michael Bull. This segment is brought to you by Evaluate. Check it out at getevaluate.com. This is online investment analysis that you can share with colleagues online to do what-if analysis. Today we're talking about advanced 1031 exchange strategies, and Ricky Novak's here. He's CEO of Strategic 1031 Exchange Advisors. And we're in Studio One, and we've talked about some of the basics guidelines of 1031s. We talked about some of the advanced strategies, and now I'd like to ask you about some some gotchas, some things, some mistakes to avoid.
So I think the number one mistake that we see clients make is they just don't plan proactively. They wait to the last minute and they miss the boat on some good planning opportunities. Specifically, let's go back to what we talked about in reverse exchanges, right? There is a limited pool of qualified replacement property out in the market today. So, you want to work with good quality professionals. I mean, obviously, I've worked with you and Bull Realty for years, right? When you have good quality agents who are educated on 1031, they can proactively help their clients start looking for properties early in the process. Because if you wait till the last minute, it's probably not going to work out the way you wanted it to.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And one thing I see people do in that regard is they look at the 45-day ID period and hope that they have some properties chosen, or maybe they're a little more advanced and they say they want to try to have a property or two under contract. But what we try to get clients to do is look at that. No, we want to have a property already inspected. We already want to have done our due diligence, because what you don't want in the position is you're doing a 1031, if you chose a property, got it under contract. Once we get into the due diligence, I'm your broker and I'm suggesting you not to buy the property.
That's exactly it. I mean, if you look at timing,
Yeah.
I mean, look how most contracts are written. You have a due diligence period and the money goes hard, and usually there's 15 or 30 days before you're closing.
Yeah.
Once money goes hard and you're confident the deal's going to close, you need to be aggressively looking for property. Don't just identify one. Have backup plans. You can ID up to 3.
Yeah.
So you may be in love with the Walgreens in downtown Chicago,
Yeah.
but look for 2 additional locations as your backup.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I like your point about looking early. And what I suggest to people is, as soon as your replacement property goes under contract, I would start looking, because you really want to try to get a property under contract, do your due diligence before that 45-day period.
Absolutely.
And I guess another mistake would be picking the wrong intermediary, right? That doesn't understand how to do it properly, or maybe puts your money in an unsafe investment.
Yeah, I mean, you want someone who is sophisticated enough to really understand the ins and outs, right? They're a player on the team, and some intermediaries are more paper pushers. They're going to send the documents to closing, and anytime you ask them a question, they're going to say, "Oh, go to your tax advisor for that." There's nothing wrong with your intermediary being able to give you some good information that you, the broker, others on your team can use. And so look for an intermediary that's really willing to step in. They're not allowed to be your tax advisor. That's what the IRS rules say, but that doesn't mean that they can't ever answer any questions whatsoever.
Right.
So,
and another mistake to avoid, they can't be your real estate broker that's helping you do the deal. Right?
absolutely, you want that independent third party.
Right. So what are some other mistakes, Ricky, that you see that people really make when they're doing 1031 exchanges?
Some of the other mistakes we generally see are people not being fully aware of the rules. We can explain them to you, but you have to actually pay attention to them, right? And you have to incorporate them. So having other people on the team, your outside third-party attorney, your real estate broker, who also are understanding those rules and helping you follow them. So I think that's pretty important. The other is making sure you understand all the options, right? The reverse exchange, the construction exchange, knowing that there are other potential exchange mechanisms you can use to help further the exchange process.
Yeah, that's a good point. And sometimes I'll see a broker that's representing a seller on a 1031, and they're selling an property held for investment, and they're doing a 1031 exchange into a vacation home or second home. Right, 'cause that can get a little risky, right?
Right, because it has to be primarily held for investment. So if it's your vacation home, what's your primary reason for owning it? Is it for personal enjoyment or is it an investment, right? That's a pretty gray area. And so if you look at what the IRS has said, you have to primarily hold the property as an investment. So if you do decide you want to buy a vacation home or second home, you need to really closely monitor what those rules say you can and cannot do with that property once you buy it.
And are there any hard guidelines there that say, hey, if you rent it out this many weeks or anything?
Sure, there's a revenue procedure actually that came out several years ago. The IRS saw this as an area of potential taxpayer abuse, but they also saw it as an area where the taxpayer needed guidance.
Right.
So a revenue procedure came out and again provided a safe harbor and said if you follow these rules, then we'll guarantee that it works. And generally what it mandates is for about a 2-year period, you really have to limit the personal use and you have to clearly be trying to rent the property out during that period of time.
Okay, so you may have hired an agent to rent it, and it could be a vacation rental or a weekly or monthly or annual rental, right?
That's correct.
And then can you later convert that to a personal use?
You can. If you follow the safe harbor rules, generally as long as you treat it as an investment for at least 2 years, then at some point you can convert it over to a primary residence or you can convert it into a second home where you no longer really have an investment intent. Now, we all know that no one buys a mountain house or a beach house or a lake house without the intent of it being a good investment, but it's more about the action that you take than just the mentality of thinking it's an investment.
Right, right. So mistakes to avoid. So pick the right intermediary. Kind of start early looking at properties. And of course you got to make sure you got the proper language in the contract of the property that you're selling, the relinquished property, right?
Correct. Interestingly, the IRS does not mandate that the contract say anything about the 1031, but you are asking the other party to the transaction, meaning if you're the seller, the buyer, right? You're asking them to also cooperate. So it's in your best interest to have language in the contract from day one that says they agree to cooperate with the exchange. You also have to make sure, this is where the intermediary comes into play, you have to make sure that the correct documentation gets signed. There's a like-kind exchange agreement that has to be signed amongst other documents. And so you need to make sure that in the event you're audited and the IRS says, show me the file, that you have all the necessary paperwork in that file.
Right, and even the closing statement, when it has the seller's name, does it have the intermediary?
Correct, it should. It should show that the intermediary, it should say, as QI for the taxpayer. So it's clear there's a QI involved with that process. Again, if you read the rules on their face, there's a lot of gray where it doesn't tell you what you really need to do or not do. So having a knowledgeable intermediary and other knowledgeable players about 1031 on your team is really important when you're doing exchanges.
Right. And let's talk about another mistake to avoid, and that's when you might be considered a dealer rather than an investor.
That's right. If you're in the process of flipping property, which a lot of people, it's not as common in commercial real estate. You certainly see it a lot more in residential, right? People buy a house, they fix it up, they immediately turn around and sell it. Well, if you're buying and selling real estate, you're no different than a convenience store that is buying Twinkies to put on the shelf for the purpose of reselling them, right?
Yeah.
So you need to make sure that you're not really treating the real estate as inventory, because if you're buying it with the immediate intent of reselling it, that doesn't meet the held for investment or used within your trade or business. It really is more like inventory, and if you're a dealer, then you can't perform an exchange on those assets that are treated as inventory.
Right, as you just pay ordinary tax, you can't do a 1031, right? And what about a developer that's bought land and he's developed his individual lots and he's building houses? Is he a dealer?
When he sells those individual houses, yes. Now, if you take a step back, maybe the developer is building houses in phase 1 and 2, but he's got a 250-acre phase 3 that he sells off to another national builder. Well, as long as he's held that on his books. So this is where your accountant's really important, because what you tell the IRS, that story is on your tax return every year. So if you reflect that that third phase of the development was held as an investment and not as inventory, and let's say he holds it for 2 years and sells it to a big national builder, well, now that can be treated as an investment even though he is selling inventory in phase 1 and phase 2 when he sells lots.
And does he have to hold that land a certain amount of time to be able to do a 1031?
So one of the kind of interesting facts is nowhere in the code does it define a required holding period. It merely says you have to hold it as an investment or use it within your trade or business. So the question becomes, how long is long enough? And that answer is really very facts and circumstances related. What are you doing with it while you hold it, right? So you have to look at a lot of moving parts, but the general rule of thumb is as long as you're holding it for at least a year and a day, then most people feel confident it should qualify. If you're more conservative, the answer you may give would be 2 years.
I see. Well, it's interesting that there's that much leeway in what people think and what they might advise.
That's the beauty and the kind of the challenge with 1031, right? Is like much of the tax code, it's really a shade of gray and not necessarily always black and white.
Yeah. All right. And if you want more information, visit Ricky's website. It's sea1031.com, and also at bullrealty.com. We have a button for tax information and 1031 exchange information. Well, thanks for joining us today, and we appreciate you listening on the radio stations, watching on YouTube. Maybe you're listening on iTunes or the show website, creshow.com. Please join us next week, and until next week, be sure that you always lead, learn, and laugh, and join us for the Commercial Real Estate Show. Hey there, thanks for checking out the Commercial Real Estate Show. Don't miss a video of special interest to you. Be sure to subscribe below. And if you appreciate the videos, be sure and thank our sponsors. There's a link to more information about them in the description. For more videos, podcasts, and articles, check out creshow.com.